This week, I will be sharing notes on how to build better relationship dynamics because I have learned that unfortunately, these things don't just happen by default. Welcome to the 11th episode of Between Me and the Ink, and as always, thank you so much for stopping by. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Faye, and I share my notes here every Monday. Also, I am trying to delink the podcast from my social media, so I haven't been posting new episodes lately. I want to be confident with uploading new episodes even when I am off social media, which is happening a lot lately, without feeling the pressure to post the link. If you're listening on Spotify, please hit the follow button to get notifications whenever a new episode goes up. And if you're on any other platform, I upload every Monday, so you can always find me when you have the time to learn a thing or two. In last week's episode, I gave my summary of the book Attached by Amir Levin and Rachel Heller, who are among the pioneer researchers of attachment theory. And according to this attachment theory, relationship dynamics are not set in stone. And that's the whole premise of this episode. But first, what are relationship dynamics? The best definition I can think of is that relationship dynamics are patterns of interaction and emotional connection between the people in that relationship. And it is not a constant. Relationship dynamics change depending on the emotional experiences of the people involved. This means that your relationship dynamics can be negative or positive, healthy or unhealthy, depending on a number of things. But before we talk about the things that create dynamics, I'd like to mention why it is important for you to understand the specific dynamics that you're experiencing in your relationship. First, when you feel that something is wrong within your relationship, it is easy to point fingers at your partner and believe that it somehow is their fault. However, in almost every dysfunction, it takes two to make the mess. Understanding your dynamics allows you to see your role in the problem, thus making it possible for you to seek resolution without getting into the blame trap. Also, for the most part, the problem is not as clear-cut. Let's say you find out that your partner has been flirting with someone else in the DMs. It could be that they're just a Libra. But the need to seek validation within clandestine contexts goes deeper than just being a default cheater. Like, for sure, they shouldn't have done that, and it's okay if you decide you don't want to deal with their shit anymore. But when you look at it objectively, it is possible to find an underlying explanation within your dynamics. For the most part, by the time it gets to cheating, the dynamics have been fucked up for longer than you'd like to admit. So generally, understanding your dynamics will help you to know when your relationship is in trouble, when you need to work on yourself, and even when you need to let go. Having said that, let's look at what creates relationship dynamics. The first building block is how you communicate with each other. We all know that effective communication is really important, but how we communicate is just as valuable in creating the relationship dynamics. Do you listen actively? Do you share your thoughts and feelings candidly? Do you let your partner vent when they need to without being condescending about it? Does your partner trust that you listen when they have something to tell you? Do you respond appropriately to their emotions? And this one is just very, very important. Are you invested in their experiences and want to learn about their interests? Are they excited to talk to you about stuff? One expectation that we often have is that our partners will tell us everything, but that requires a level of vulnerability that we cannot demand of anyone. Instead, we need to work on our responses to ensure that the other person feels safe enough to share their innermost thoughts and feelings. Power struggles also tend to influence the dynamics. For example, in most heterosexual relationships, societal norms and gender roles contribute greatly to power struggles. Men wanting to be the head rather than being partners will always be a cause of problems within these relationships. And sometimes the problem can be the women not wanting to take the lead in areas where they are better equipped to be in charge. Either way, if you're experiencing power struggles, no matter how subtle they may be, you are likely to feel a shift in your relationship dynamics. And the biggest problem with power struggles is that they cause a lot of contempt and resentment. The good thing is that power struggles are easily negotiated once you remember that you are on the same team as partners. Worldviews also generally influence dynamics. You will notice, for example, that if you're dating a people pleaser, your dynamics shift more to make you a giver. I don't yet know the science behind this, but people pleasers rarely give to their partners as much as they do to others. Instead, they expect their partners to take on the burden of replenishing them after they have given everything away. Your worldview determines not just how you think of yourself, but also of your partner. So if there's a past wound that distorts your vision, you will likely have related issues influencing your relationship dynamics. Personal struggles like need for control, all forms of addiction, and economics will influence the relationship dynamics. For example, people who have an overbearing need for control will likely become very controlling within their relationship. People who are struggling with addictions will bring their struggles into the relationship as well. As for economics, I think by now we all know that the way we relate with money ends up affecting how you relate with your partner. So much so that more than half of the divorce cases quote finance as an underlying cause. If your finances affect your temperament, it makes sense to expect that it will also affect your relationship. I get really stressed out when I'm worrying about money, and I've had to make peace with the fact that it will affect how well I can connect with anyone. Emotional maturity is the last pillar of relationship dynamics that I'd like to highlight today. Relationships will always have a lot of highs and lows, and they take a lot of negotiation. Emotional maturity dictates how you respond to these highs and lows and how well you negotiate. Notably, emotional maturity is not a constant. You might handle yourself well in one situation and be a complete asshole in another. And to some extent, your person should have enough grace for you to accommodate these shifts. But at the end of the day, your level of emotional maturity determines on average how well you interact and connect with your person. At the beginning of the relationship, there is a healthy baseline in the way you interact and connect because you have a clean slate and are both excited to explore each other. However, as you accumulate your experiences of each other, your dynamics become fully dependent on how you both conduct yourselves within that relationship. So, what causes problems in your relationship dynamics? The first horseman is communication. In an ideal relationship, you are required to share your thoughts and feelings and to listen when your partner is sharing their thoughts and feelings. And this is a very simple thing and yet the most difficult one. I think as humans, we tend to lean towards making assumptions more than seeking clarity, which is why miscommunication can easily end an otherwise solid relationship. Assumptions tend to remove the other person from the equation because your thinking is not their thinking. So it is impossible for you to read their mind and know their thoughts without engaging them. The second horseman is interaction. It is not enough that you talk to each other. How you talk to each other can cause problems within your relationship. Nobody likes being talked down to, no matter the context. BDSM is obviously an exception, so don't even go there. Your interaction always needs to convey love and respect, even within heated arguments, which I think can be quite the test. Any show of contempt, dislike, or disrespect really fucks up your dynamics and can be hard to repair. The third horseman is conflict resolution. Conflicts are going to come up in any relationship that you get into. The real test is how you resolve them. When we were going through the self-awareness phase on Facebook and I think Instagram, people would post about how nasty they get when they're upset and would laugh about it and silently make a note to avoid that person in real life. Or at least I did that. Because the last thing I want is to hang out with someone who will snap my neck if I upset them. Learning how to resolve conflicts amicably is important for maintaining all relationships because yelling, slamming doors, name-calling, blocking, stonewalling, acting out, and all that other nasty stuff can mess up your relationship faster than you can apologize. And with conflict resolution comes another mini horseman called compromise. Like I mentioned in the episode on negotiating for your needs, you have to compromise in order to be in a healthy relationship. In some conflicts, you have to choose between getting what you want and keeping that person in your life. And regardless of your pride levels, if you care about keeping that person, you will have to compromise every now and then. The challenge here is in ensuring that you both are willing to compromise as needed. And to be honest, compromising is a whole other conversation because it is not as simplistic as we take it to be at face value. The last horseman is love languages. You can love someone to the moon and back, but if you are not loving them in their love language, trust me, you are wasting your love because they are not feeling it. I have been in relationships where affirmations were given in plenty, but there were no acts of service, and it always felt like I was in the wrong relationship because according to me, I wasn't loved. Personally, words don't do much for me. Same way acts of service won't mean anything to someone whose love language is gifts or quality time. When you love someone in their love language, your relationship dynamics change because they actually start feeling loved. But when you don't, well, they also don't, and you start experiencing regular conflicts and a growing distance. Unfortunately, We don't learn about relationship dynamics early enough, so for most of us, by the time we pay attention to this shit, the relationship is usually in a lot of trouble. But when do you know that you need to change your relationship dynamics? This mostly depends on your relationship, but any major shifts, often in the wrong direction, should be an indicator that there is work to be done. But also, there are a number of obvious indicators that you might be in trouble. I'll give you a few examples. First, if you no longer feel compelled to keep the promises that you make to your partner, or if your partner has been breaking their promises to you a little more often than they used to, you are in trouble. We keep our promises to people that we really value. So for me, not keeping promises is a sign that there is a problem. Of course, there can be extenuating circumstances when it comes to these promises. But generally, if you notice that you have broken 2 or 3 or 4 promises in the recent past, you need to take an honest look at what else is happening within that relationship. If you haven't been as affectionate as you used to be, that's also a major red flag. It could be that you used to walk together while holding hands, and now when you are walking, you prefer to be behind or in front of them. Or maybe you used to watch TV together while cuddling, and now you prefer to watch shows on your phone or laptop, often alone in bed or on the sofa. Any major changes in the way you used to interact is a problem that needs your attention. If you have stopped making future plans with your partner, then it is also possible that you no longer expect them to be in your future. That would be a good time to think things through and figure out what has changed. If you notice that you are no longer interested in offering them validation or being their cheerleader, that's a red flag. You need to be your partner's safe base when they are facing the world, and not willing to offer support is indicative of problematic dynamics. If you're no longer having fun in your relationship, that could also be a sign that you're in trouble. And this happens a lot after major conflicts, when people retreat into themselves and lose the connection. You can't have fun with someone that you don't like. So it's time to find out when you stopped liking them and what you can do to move past it. If you're no longer intentional about spending time with your partner, that's also a sign. Personally, I don't care how busy you are. If you can't find the time to hang out with me all week, we might as well be broken up. And unless you're out of town, I don't get not making time for my person. So if you'd rather be with your friends or by yourself when you're not busy, and you don't want to make time for your person, there's obviously a problem there. If your conversations are reduced to surface interactions, and there's a difference in the frequency, depth, or length of your conversations, you know there's a problem. The first thing to go is always the warmth and friendship that you share. If you're no longer making plans, any plans like to hang out, go for dates, clean the house, shop for groceries, go on a trip, you are actively drifting apart. If you've been having regular fights and the conflicts remain largely unresolved, you need to start paying attention. Lastly, if you find yourself getting attracted to someone else or even fantasizing about getting into another relationship, well, you already know. And you might want to argue that you are polyamorous or ethically non-monogamous, but you wanting to get into another relationship is all indicative of the relationship dynamics of your current one. And now, the main reason why we are here. How do you change the dynamics in your relationship for the better? There are a few things that you can tweak and apply as they suit your situation. First, ensure equality and a sense of fairness in the distribution of responsibility. Note that both equality and fairness are very subjective to your personal context, hence the need for proper negotiation on both sides. I think that the first sign that you're doing badly is when you insist on a 50-50 split that doesn't consider any extenuating circumstances. This to me shows that there is no room for compassion in your relationship, and that you two need to start actually caring about each other. You need to be in a relationship that can survive when you don't have the 50% to give, because there is trust that you will be willing to give 100% when needed. The second thing you need to do is to understand and manage your emotions so that you can take responsibility for your words and actions. People who struggle with their emotions tend to act out during conflict. They say and do the nastiest things that leave the relationship on the verge of ending, not because of the conflict, but because of how the conflict is handled. This is why getting a better handle on your emotions will make it easier for you and your person to navigate conflicts and still love and care for each other afterwards. Apologizing after being nasty to someone is cool, but it doesn't undo the damage you've caused. Eventually, After one too many outbursts, your partner starts dreading conflicts and may prefer to simply walk away instead of putting themselves through another one of your outbursts. The third thing is that instead of judgment, you should apply curiosity so that you can always choose connection over isolation. When your partner does something that you consider out of pocket, wonder why they did it instead of passing a summary judgment that there is something fundamentally wrong with them. For example, if you are flirting with someone else, curiosity will ask what you are looking for in that interaction and why you are not finding it within your relationship. Judgment will simply label you a whore and a cheat and leave it at that. And my unpopular opinion is that both of these reactions are right. The only difference is that the first reaction is meant to preserve the relationship, but the second one will end it. Approaching tricky situations with kindness allows for a deeper understanding and connection. And sometimes that's what you actually need. You will also need to set and respect boundaries. Depending on what is throwing your relationship dynamics off, there could be an element of resentment creeping up. If the resentment is as a result of your boundaries being violated, then the best thing to do is to communicate those boundaries. Similarly, it could be that your partner has started resenting you because you have violated their boundaries. Be willing to ask for clarity over the said boundaries and to respect them going forward. Sometimes when someone tells you that they didn't like what you did, you feel inclined to go on the defensive and say things like, I was joking, or I didn't mean it, or some shit like that. Instead, acknowledge that you upset them and be intentional about never doing it again. Crossing someone's boundaries does not make you a bad person unless it was intentional. Another thing you need to build the right dynamics is to practice active listening. In active listening, you don't just listen to respond. When your person is speaking, you show interest by maintaining eye contact and paying attention to both their verbal and nonverbal cues. You also withhold any judgment or advice that may pop up in your mind and ask open-ended questions that will encourage them to provide more clarity and maybe even get more vulnerable in that conversation. I think it's also good to paraphrase and reflect on what your partner has just shared with you. This will allow for clarifications in case you have misunderstood something, while also communicating to your partner that you have been listening to them and that you want to really understand what they are saying. And there's something I feel I need to emphasize. Do not paraphrase with authority like you have summarized what your person means. Paraphrase like a question, because sometimes you actually hear your own things, and when you repeat with authority, it feels like you're intentionally misconstruing their words and making your own conclusions, regardless of what they are trying to tell you. Also, when someone paraphrases something that is not what you are saying, instead of being frustrated and choosing to end the conversation, please try to offer some grace and just repeat what you said, and maybe explain where they have gone wrong. It will feel like a lot of work, but if they are not intentionally mishearing you, it will be worth it in the end. The goal when it comes to relationship dynamics is to find a somewhat balanced footing for your relationship. You want both parties to feel loved, cared for, and respected, and this is best achieved by creating a balance of power. Both parties need to have the same level of importance in that relationship, but a balance of power requires trust, communication, and vulnerability. Trust can be built over time by how you show up in your relationship. If you don't show up consistently, it is hard to expect that you will be trusted because your partner never knows what to expect from you. I think vulnerability also comes from trust. If you didn't show up when I was being vulnerable, I am allowed to decide that I don't have to be vulnerable with you anymore. For the most part, people have to earn your vulnerability because you don't go around spilling your guts to everyone. But also, it is possible that if you struggle with vulnerability, you need to learn how to open up more when you are with someone that makes you feel safe. It is not enough to resolve conflicts. You have to resolve those conflicts fairly and constructively. By the time you are concluding that conversation, you need to have a way forward and your bond needs to be intact. This means that if you are mean, you need to apologize right there and then. It also means that you are not allowed to use hurtful words or label your partner one way or another. Focus on the actions and the emotions. If I am upset that you were late, I'll just say I am upset that you were late. And your response should be, I am sorry that I was late. It won't happen again. End of story. Here, the constructive part is that it won't happen again. And the fair part is that you are acknowledging what you did and apologizing for it without over-explaining it. When you over-explain, even if you're not justifying your actions, it feels like you don't believe you are wrong, which then means it will most likely happen again. You also need to validate emotions and practice empathy. I once had a conversation with someone who said that unless they actually did something with the intention of hurting someone, they do not apologize. And I spent over an hour trying to get them to say that intention is irrelevant when you hurt someone. The thing is, if your actions have hurt me, you have to accept that I am hurt, regardless of your intentions. Validating emotions does not have to mean taking responsibility for them. You are simply accepting that your partner is hurt, and that is very important. Invalidating someone's feelings is extremely hurtful and can result in a deeper rift than the actual action that caused the conflict to begin with. Practicing empathy, on the other hand, implies being sensitive to their emotional state so that you do not over-expect when they're activated or dysregulated. Empathy allows you to give your partner some grace when they have an emotional outburst, although this should never be at the expense of your safety, whether physical, emotional, or financial. Another important thing that you can do to create the dynamics that work for you is to schedule quality time together. For some reason, we expect to just have time with our people without putting in the work. Just like you schedule appointments and work engagements, you have to schedule dates and hang out with your person. And this is especially important if you live together, because once you get to see each other regularly, it is easy to imagine that that's enough. But it isn't. If you're not spending scheduled quality time with your person, you risk becoming an acquaintance and not knowing that much about how they are doing and what's going on in their life. Also, it's hard to maintain a friendship with someone if you constantly show them they are not a priority. It gets very hurtful to watch your person scheduling dates and meetups with their friends while never doing the same with you. This just communicates that they are prioritizing other relationships while taking you for granted. So just do better and schedule that date or movie night. Now, the last thing is perhaps the most difficult one for most people. You have to be willing to compromise every now and then. Like, it is a necessity. If you're not compromising, I don't know how you're in a relationship. For example, if your partner wants to go to Diani and you want to go to Nanyuki for Valentine's or for your upcoming vacation, it's okay if you all end up in Diani. It does not mean that they don't love you or value your happiness. You will still have fun with your person in Diani. In fact, I would encourage you to go to Diani and then plan a future trip to Nanyuki. Or start with Nanyuki and then go to Diani in a few weeks' time. But in situations where it must be one or the other, don't be too hard-pressed to go with your option. If a goal of the trip is to spend quality time together, it will be achieved regardless of where you go, as long as you both show up in love and kindness. And as we come to the end, thank you so much for sticking around. This is the 11th episode, so it is yet another milestone for my non-committal self, and it's been quite the ride. Thank you for all the support and encouragement. I really do appreciate any feedback I've gotten so far. And as we go into the new week, may you blast through all your milestones and experience a new height of self-trust. Bye.